Hi everyone, it's Rodrigo here from my telescope. Today I have Charlie de Thibault with me from Growth Dynamics, and super excited to have him here. And I won't take any of the claim for fame here. It's actually all of Charlie's idea to do this. So I'm super happy to have him with me. And yeah, please drop any questions. And I know that we've sent out this to the My Telescope user base. We got a lot of feedback, and some people can't join. So they asked me if this is going to be somewhere else after. And yes, it will be on YouTube, it will be on LinkedIn, and of course on our website. And Charlie, hi, welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, please, before we do anything, introduce yourself and how you've been working with Share of Search and why you think it's important. And then I think we can go to the main event. I think what people really want to know is like how you create a map and DMA map on how you on your different locations.
Right. So I founded Growth Dynamics a couple of years ago, almost 3 years actually, or a couple. I can't. I stopped counting already. So we a consultancy company focus on growth, and so what you really want to understand is what is driving growth, and so. The difference I would say from a measurement vendor, for example, is that we're really looking into marketing in the two-stage process, like creating preference and then capturing that preference. And that creating preference part is usually what multi-touch attribution tool or even last touch, like any attribution tool misses. And I've seen this a lot. So I worked as a principal data strategist and as a measurement manager at Oracle. And when you start to see, for example, deals that were coming from non-brand search, for example, and you start to dive into summaries of sales notes, you can see that actually this was definitely not an internet search led deal. And that started to make me think like, actually, there's something else. And then we started to dive into what drives people to buy. And there was a lot of very interesting research paper about with Liz Binet. We also looked into the behavior of a B2B, a long consideration journey. Like 80% of people pick a brand they already know before starting the buyer journey. And also finally, the famous 595%. 5% people are in market at any given time and 95 are not, but they're going to buy 80% of the time a brand they already knew when they start the buyer journey. So that's the whole thing. So what we do understand is that attribution is not going to solve this at all. MMM and incrementality are quite short-term focus. They're not long-term focus. And so there's that, but it's very good for the capturing part, but we're missing the building preference part. And that's where Share of Search started to become very handy for us. And we started to see very good result with a client, for example. We start to push for Share of Search to start to understand what is driving Share of Search. YouTube, for example, is a good example. Social media reach is a good example too. And then we start to see the revenue going up. So, and there's two things that we saw without claiming pure causality is that there is a strong relationship between the share of search of our clients and their revenue. And there's also share of search tend to increase before revenue. So there's that timing element. So without doing a claim where I'm going to have everybody on my back in a second, like there is, we're getting close to it. And so what we do see also over time is that the more we increase it, the more the revenue comes in. And that's where we started to think, okay, share of search is extremely important and we need to optimize for it. Now, what I did also see is that DMA level performance is really different. If you look at, because we always say, oh, channels optimize across DMA to know what they're doing. Yes, in their very narrow focus in their own channels. And so when you work with Google and Meta, like a lot of people do, and you have offline sales, these optimization tools have very limited knowledge about everything that's going on. And so no, they are not able to properly and perfectly allocate budget across DMA. And so what I started to dive into it is I started to see there was a very big difference in share of search per DMA. And that also started to help us to to be able to create some baseline, and so understand, okay, if we, and very, very narrow testing environment where we can really push into one DMA and see what's going on. And this is where it got very interesting. And also when you talk to CFOs and CEOs, because the question always comes, where do we have to invest our money? And then when I started to show that to the C-levels, to the exec, okay, this is where we're losing ground, this is where we're gaining ground, this is why we gain ground. Also, the conversation around brand really changed. We go from we have no idea how to measure it, so let's cut it, and into, actually this is actually building our territory, and we're owning place in the market, and then we'll be able to better capture this, because again, coming back to the 80% of people will pick a brand they already know.
And no, it's a very interesting question, and I think, one of the most frequent questions we get at My Telescope is like, how do you build this out of DMA level? And also, how can you show the kind of geographic spread on where your brand is building up and how you're stacking up against competition? So I think this is something that a lot of people have been waiting for, and of course we have many times been thinking about building it into My Telescope, but in the end we've realized that there's so many good visualization tools out there. So maybe it's better that you use our API, and then you can use your own preferred visualization. You could go to your own vibe coding and do whatever you want, right, to show the stuff in the way you want to show it. But another question I have for you, because I know that I've also heard a lot of criticism actually about share of search in regards to they claim it doesn't work at all. What is your response to that? And have you seen also, so that's the first question. And the other question is, have you been doing share of search with Google Trends versus, for example, Google search volumes with Google Ads instead? Like, that's the data we have in My Telescope. Have you seen any difference between using those two different methodologies?
So to your question, yes, I have a very good example. For example, one founder started to post a lot of job spec on LinkedIn, and so we started to see a lot of brand searches. But this is and so what we see is that there is always a risk that that searches can be driven, but you can increase the number of search, but they're not going to drive sales. So it's important that there's no like perfect solution to that, but it's important to know, and that's one thing we catch. For SaaS business, for example, we should definitely always exclude the login, the brand search plus login, because that's just people like logging into the website. That's not really driving anything. I do agree that from a data perspective, it's not perfect, but I did see it's working. If you look at like a smaller event, for example, if you do a big event in a region or a social media campaign, and you look at that data, and when you started to push and when you stop, and then you look at share of when you do it for a month, specifically like what you did in that period of time, then it's becoming more robust. But obviously, yes, there are some caveats like this. To your question about the difference between Google Trend and Google Ads, yes, I agree, there are some difference, but you are a much bigger expert to answer really the questions and the difference on these ones.
Yeah, no, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because due to the fact that Google Trends is pre-indexed, it doesn't give you, for example, the example that you gave on like remove the keyword of logins. It's something that you don't have that control over the data. And of course, due to that fact, it's sometimes harder to do smaller brands, but also to go to build your own granular kind of point of view. So I think that's also why I say, yes, Google Trends is a fantastic free tool, of course, but you have to be careful because you don't know what's behind it, and you don't get full control over the data.
And you don't have DMA level.
Exactly. No, actually you do. You can actually break it down per city and per location as well. In some, if they decide that they want to give the data for it. So that's the problem, that you are very dependent on what the teams have decided to do.
Okay.
But I don't know, without any maybe like drum roll, let's maybe go for what people have really come here for, to understand how to build DMA visualizations and how to think about it.
Yeah.
Do you want to share your screen, or how do we do this?
Yes, please share my screen. So this is the so we have a shared asset repo where we have everything about it, and then I'll open the link in a second. But if you click on share of search here, you have the notebook that we're going to see today. We have all the libraries here that you need to run the notebook, and then you have you have some demo data, so you don't need the API for this one, just so you can run it on your side. So. And now I'm going to jump straight into the notebook itself. So, and we're going.
Sorry, Charles. Before you move on, where can they find this repository? Is it on GitHub, I suppose?
Yeah, it's on GitHub. I mean, I can. Can I just drop it in? I mean, we. No, I can't drop in. I don't seem to be able to put a comment in the chat. We're going to be able. I'll put it in my life, but we're going to be. We'll share this.
Perfect. Sure. Thank you.
So, so this is a notebook that you can find in the GitHub, and then one thing that is very important is the API manager. Once you have the, so actually, let's go to see how my telescope looks like. So this is, for example, Adidas and New Balance for Texas. And so what we do see, for example, is that we have New Balance slightly taking market share searches here, and then if we go down, we have the same we have the same chart in terms of percentage, and you can see that New Balance was at 10% in December 21, and now it's at 29. So it's quite an impressive quite an impressive increase. Here, obviously, for simplicity, I assume that there's only 3 brands in that category. Obviously, it's not the case, but it's just for the example today. Now, the problem that we have is that we have only one. We have to do one dashboard per state, and that's where the notebook that we have will start to come handy. And we have an ID of that notebook that is here just after the slash. And I'm telling you this now because it's going to be important in a minute. So we're moving back to my telescope. So once you have the API, I warmly recommend you, obviously, warmly recommend you to never put it in a code, because if you put it in a code and you push it in GitHub, then your key is in GitHub for eternity, and so you need to ask for another key. The great thing about Google is that we have a secret manager here, and so you can have the My Telescope name, you put the value here, and it's all hidden, and it's all secure because only your user has access to it. Now then you load the libraries that are in my Telescope Python library, so you don't have, so all the code is outside the notebook, and so you don't have to do anything. But what you can do is just like run all, and then you'll see that it's loading all the library, it's done. Here what we're going to say is that it's false, so we're not using demo data, so it's going to load the real data, and we say, okay, our brand is New Balance in this example. And so as you can see here, it's fetching. I also simplified, I didn't create a dashboard for all states, but here it's fetching for New York, California, and Texas. And so the first thing that we can see here is the first part of the map, where you can see that, for example, for New Balance, the share of search the volume of search has decreased by 18%, but the share of search is stable, which means that really in that category, like we have a decrease in New York. But for California, for example, the volume is decreasing, but the share of search is increasing. So New Balance is doing great in California when compared against Nike and Adidas. And so by doing the whole thing, by doing the whole state, the whole country, you'll start to very clearly start to see some changes. You'll see that in some part of the country, you'll have your searches increase a lot, in some others that don't. And usually, and that's a great indicator of revenue. What you're going to see is that's where there's a strong relationship between your share of search and your revenue. So the states with the high share of search tend to have the best performers, and the one with the lowest share of search tend to has to be the lowest performance. Well, obviously, depending on size and everything, but this is usually the ballpark, the idea of what's going on. So this is the year-on-year data, and then if we go down here, we have the actual, the current situation. So for example, you can see that in Texas, New Balance has 32% and has 29% in New York, and so on. So this is a very basic chart. It doesn't really show you any time series and anything, but that's okay, because now we're going to generate a HTML report, which is going to appear here in the document, and I have already opened here. And that HTML report is going to create you a page per state. So you can pick California if you want to go straight to California, or Texas, and so on. And each of the states are going to have the two. Oh, sorry, my bad. I forgot to change window. That's the HTML files I was referring to. And so you can jump to the different states here, and each of those states are going to have the timeline. And as you can see here, this is going to be very similar to what these are basically the two charts you have in My Telescope directly. So now you have a nice neat report with all the states by one. And you can see that, for example, Adidas and New Balance in California is increasing a lot in search volume, and Nike is slowly decreasing in that case. Interestingly, what you can see also, there's a much stronger seasonality effect for Nike than for the other brand. And that helps you to really see over time what's going on. And that's where it's getting very interesting, is because you see it's by month. And then, so if you start to do like a lot of upper funnel traffic, you should, if you do it right, and so assuming you do it right, you should start to see a change in what you see. And if it's and then what you have to look at is obviously the seasonality. As you can see, for Nike, it's a bit stronger, but sometimes you'll see that suddenly you have a spike, an increase on a moment it's not seasonal, and that's usually because you're doing something with your brand. No, that is just brand, but the good thing is also you can do the same. You can do the same with products. I forgot to say, I said the dashboard reference is important. I'll go back to this. You see, I underlined this number here. And the reason why it's important, 6 BP, is because you're going to see that's the little thing that you have to do on your site, is that the 6 BP here, is that you have to fill that dictionary here. So you say, okay, New York, and that's the reference. California, that's the reference. Sorry, I should have said that from the beginning, but that's really the only input you have to do, is to include the dashboard part. And now what we can also do is, we don't have to do just brand, we can do whatever we want. So here I did an example where I'm looking into running shoes, sneakers, and tennis shoes. And so that can be very interesting for a big brand, for example, or a smaller brand, but really started to see if there's any difference like in type of shoes or any type of clothes or anything else, if there's a demand that is increasing more than somewhere else. And that's super important, for example, for the executive team. And this is a discussion I have with the merch team somewhere. When you have shopper across the United States, is how much we order and where do we put it. And so this is very interesting, because it can help you to understand where the demand is. And it correlates quite a lot with the change of your product. If you look at your different product and you see share of search, and you look at the trend of your sales and the trend of the share of search, you'll see that they're actually quite similar. And so, for example, here, assuming, again, we have one category with running shoes, sneakers, and tennis shoes, which is a big assumption, I agree. Well, you can see that as a running shoes, you can see that you have an increase by 21% in Texas, 24% in New York, and 18% in California. So when you just compare running shoes to sneakers and tennis shoes, running shoes seems to really increase. And if you just want to have the tennis one, the only thing you can do is that you change this here, then you run it, and then it updates, and you see that the tennis shoes are actually losing a lot, minus 22%, minus 23, minus 26, and the same than the above with the brand. You can have the same table with absolute numbers, the current one, because I just changed tennis shoes, I guess, I suspect. Yeah. So yeah. That is, oh yeah, tennis, it is. Sorry, I was a bit. And then you can see the share of search. So of people searching for tennis shoes, running shoes, or sneakers, only 10% of people in New York typed tennis shoes. But in Texas, where tennis shoes are actually quite, and this is something I've learned while doing that exercise, tennis shoes are apparently quite in demand in Texas. You see that 20% of the people who type each of those three brand products are actually say tennis shoes. And then you can we do the same. We run a state report product, and then just the only thing that you have to do here is that you have to download it. Okay. And then okay, here we go. And then you open it in your web browser. So I'm using Google Chrome, it's working very well. And then you have the time series again here, California. And then you can see that for some reason, running shoes, like there's a massive jump that happened in June between running shoes and sneakers. I don't know exactly why. So this is what the data shows. You can actually see in the absolute data, it's actually not sneakers that has drastically changed. That there has been like a massive spike for running shoes. And in New York, you see that the sneakers are really like dominating the market by very far. Although you also see that you had an increase in running shoes in New York. And then you can see, indeed, as we told, the tennis shoes are more in line with the rest. In comparison to the other, yeah, I mean, it's still behind, but it's less behind. Voila. Do you have any questions about what I'm showing right now? Maybe Rodrigo?
Yeah, well, we got some questions here in the, and one is actually more about like when looking into DMAs from Harrison Phillips. When you look at DMAs, are you more likely to pick DMAs where you're losing ground to try and regain strengths, or do you pick DMAs where you can double down on growth? So I think it's more of a tactical question on not maybe what we're seeing, but more on how to act, I suppose.
It is a good question, and there's not right or wrong question. So do you want to pile up on the winners or try to change a loser into a winner? And that's a budget optimization problem. You need to figure out what is best for you to do. Usually what I would do is I would start to look into diminishing returns. So usually if we go back to the discussion of preference, 80% of people are going to pick a brand they already know, right? So there is a limited audience you can convert. And so if you just push money into the bottom of the funnel, at some point you'll have a diminishing return because you have exhausted your audience. In that case, then it makes sense to invest more in preference to increase that pool of people willing to buy from you. So I think before diving into should we push more into trying to make a loser a winner, or should we pile up on the winners? I think I would start to first look into diminishing return. Usually when you start to look at mid-funnel measurement, at incrementality, you start to see curves where like the spend is not really bringing much ROI anymore. And that's usually a signal of, okay, we need to move that money into upper funnel.
Good. Thank you for that. And then a more practical question here from VJ Malavia. Can you use login in Google Trends? And the answer is you can probably search for that specific word in Google Trends, but it's going to give you the index for that word. But if you look for the total, say, brand or product name, or if you're in SaaS, you're not going to be able to exclude it. And that's why it's better to work with ads data, because there you're going to have volumes and keywords where you can actually choose yourself which ones that you want to group into one index.
Do you have a paper available that explains how you can negate some keywords in My Telescope?
No, it's no, we don't.
Right.
But we do have some videos on YouTube on how you can kind of play around with in creating your own topics, and how you build these indices, so to speak. And here we have a question from Björn. So you need to have a topic per region in My Telescope in order to be able to use this, if I'm right.
You need to have a topic per region in My Telescope. So I think, so obviously, if you're a smaller company, you might not need to have the entire map. For example, for one client, we did almost all the map. We saw that 80% of the revenue was coming from 20 DMAs. So there was no point doing all the 52. I think it's important and I hope I'm answering the question, but what I would do is that I would split the revenue by DMAs, and then I would understand which are the important DMAs for the company and which one are not.
Yeah, and from a technical point of view, yes, you need to create one topic per region. And then, of course, what Charlie is saying is that you don't need to do all of the regions. Take maybe the ones that are important, but from a My Telescope point of view, I want you to do every region that you can think of.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, it really depends on if you have a business that has more or less a bit everywhere across the entire US, then maybe the DMA level doesn't make sense. But if, for example, you have a little bit everywhere and then 5 DMAs where you have a lot of revenues, what I would probably do is that I would look into like across US DMA, and then I would look at DMA across US like national, and then I would look at DMA level for the very important DMAs.
Yeah, and also for you that are not having businesses in the US, of course, we in My Telescope at least we cover you can break it down per cities and per states in other parts of the world as well. So you go in. So in My Telescope, when you look for regions, you can ask, and if it's not there, please reach out in our chat, because we can always add more regions if we haven't added the ones that you were looking for. So of course, some countries you can go more granular, which others you have to stay more on country level. It depends on what Google has decided on how to break it down.
We can actually share. And one important thing is that I kept using DMA since the beginning of the call, but it's a mistake. I'm using states. Sorry, everybody. But yeah, to say exactly what you mentioned, like we have the location here, and then you have all the countries, and some countries do have splits. Argentina, for example, you have province, I can see. So yeah, it depends on the country. Some countries have splits, some don't. Yeah, but that's where we can change it and select the location we want.
Yeah, and if you don't find the one, as I said, please write to us, and we can always see if we can add those locations into the system. And Charlie, is there anything else you want to share with the teams, or sorry, for the people listening in here, or any like things that they should think about specifically when they set this up, and what they should think about?
I think we explained, like negating some key element is important. I think, as I said, on my side, it really changed the discussion around investing in brands, because when you start to show those trends, when you start to see those showing those states, those maps, I saw a lot of executives who were suddenly like, oh, okay, it makes sense. That's what we can do. We can start to understand really where we're strong and where we're not, and what we can do about this. And because what I do see in my experience is that we still struggle a lot to invest in the right thing, which is brand, which is building preference. We tend to just go straight into the capture side, but unfortunately, you have only people willing to buy from you will buy from you, and you have to make people willing to buy from you. Is that simple? And this is why the whole thing of preference and demand capture will never fit into one dashboard, because they have to be evaluated with very different metrics. And so for the upper funnel, we have share of search, we have surveys, we have brand lift, and those are the metrics that we need to use to evaluate the performance of upper funnel. And for the bottom of funnel, yes, incrementality, MMM, mid funnel are the tools I usually use. There's a lot of caveats with MTA. That's not the subject of the day. So I'm saying, yeah, but careful with MTA, because, well, very quickly, MTA will just show you the touch point that is successfully joined to a journey. And what I do see, for example, with social media, that you have a lot of very important touch points that are never that are never linked to a journey. And so I ended up in a situation once where I had a client using MTA, quite a big one. You have 3 big ones in the US, one of them. And they were allocating 2.5% to social media, and through survey, incrementality, and MMM, we found out it was 30%. So we have to be very careful when we use MTA. Personally, well, feel free to follow me if you don't yet. I also have a YouTube channel where I'm talking about all of this. I'm posting on LinkedIn very often. I also have a growth playbook. If you're interested, we're covering share of search. We're covering how we use the different measurement tools to lead to growth. Happy to share this with you if you DM me. And I really hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Charlie. And I've got some last questions here, and I'll try to answer them as well. But so are DMAs available in my telescope? And the answer to that is not as a DMA, as a selection. You can build your own DMAs when you build topics. So for that, please reach out in our chat and book a meeting with Carl, with one of the Carls there, that he can guide you on how to build that. I have another question here from Jesse about, does the United States have cities available, or is it only states and DMAs? And basically it is cities. And as I said, DMAs, it's something you have to build up on yourself if you want to group them as based on the Nielsen DMAs, for example. So that's something that you have to build up a topic on that. But cities you can do.
I would recommend to start with states, actually. I used DMA by mistake at the beginning. I think states is actually quite granular already. No, again, it depends on the business, right? If you have a business which is really located in a certain area, then it makes sense to go down into city and things. But my recommendation by experience is to start at state level, and then you see where it's necessary to complexify.
So yeah, so I really hope that you enjoy this. I got really happy, Charlie, that you did this and that you reached out to do this webinar, because I felt that it's something that people have been asking for, and so it's always good when someone from the community reaches out and wants to show help the rest of the community. So if anybody else is using the platform or thinking about how to build and use this to build awareness about how to build brands and brand growth, and especially now, I think with the zero-click search happening, a lot of people have to move away from maybe pure performance to actually start thinking about building brands. Would love to reach out so we can run these webinars together. And to the question if this is going to be on YouTube, yes, it will be on YouTube, and we will also have it on our website. Yeah, so thank you all for joining in, and really fun to see this. I will start playing myself. I will do something for Latin America and actually break it down. In Latin, we don't have cities, but in the US we do have. So I'll start playing around there to see how it's going into the World Cup now. Which of the sneaker brands that's going to win? Which of the sports brand that's going to win that war in Latin America?
That's an interesting use case.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a nice rest of the Thursday. And for us here in Sweden and Europe, we'll probably be closing the day off soon.
See you. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for coming.